Finance Committee, in spite of the 21st century technology, we are reverting back to the 20th century technology. So, John, if you would call the roll.
Senator Howell. Here. Senator Sasslaw. Here. Senator Lucas.
Here.
Senator Newman. Here. Senator Ruff. Here. Senator Wagner.
Here.
Senator McDougall.
Here.
Senator Vogel.
Here.
Senator Carrico.
Here.
Senator Overchain. Senator Barker. Here. Senator Donovan. Senator Stewart. Senator Dance. Senator Hanger.
Here.
And Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum, and in the event they're needed, I'll have proxy forms. It's all old school. Only Senator Sasslaw and I know how old.
Well, at least they knew how to write back in 1699, so that's a good thing. I'm going to ask Secretary Lane to make a presentation first, but in order to expedite it, no, you can sit down just for a second, Mr. Secretary. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say this. Jefferson told me that people would make fun of me if I hung around this long.
I bet so. There are a couple of bills that we're going to pass by for the day for various reasons. First is House Bill 124, which is Delegate Austin's bill. Without objection, we're going to pass that bill by for the day. Also, Delegate Hope's bill, House Bill 190, we are going to pass that by for the day without objection. And I see Delegate Orrock is here, and I think you only have one bill, and that's 871. And I would entertain a motion that would be more appropriate to take up in our Rules Committee. That's not like your Rules Committee. So if I could entertain a...
Is that a good thing? I don't know.
Well, I guess we'll see at the end of the day, won't we? If I could have a motion to re-refer House Bill 871 to Rules Committee. Been moved and seconded, House Bill 871 be re-referred to the Gentle Committee on Rules. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, and that bill is re-referred. Now, Mr. Secretary, we will be delighted to hear from you, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing me here today. I will be quick because I know you have quite a bit on the agenda. Okay, all right, well, then I'll still be quick in there. So the good news is, I think you did all get my letter yesterday. The good news is that our receipts remain in a positive trend. They were up over about 5.1% for the month. But as I take you through this presentation, I'll point out to you some of the things I think are noteworthy and are generating those increases. So I thought I'd start a little bit just to quickly talk about some national and state economic indicators, then look at our January year-to-date for the fiscal year that we're in, and then possibly some next steps. And Mr. Chairman, I'll probably intermingle in there some comments regarding the Jobs Tax Cut Act that was done at the federal level and how that may impact Virginia going forward. So just quickly on some of these national levels, I point out a couple of things here. Payroll unemployment continues to rise in our nation, indicating that the expansion just continues, and I will remind everyone that we are now only about 14 months away from being the longest economic expansion in our country's history. So we need to keep that in mind as we look out over the next few years. I think in the short term, everybody anticipates that to continue, but there are some headwinds that may cause some issues as we get later on out a few years. I'll also point out initial claims for unemployment fell by 9,000, some of their lowest levels in many years. Now, that's good news, but it also indicates that we have a tightening labor market and average wage rates are going up. I bring that out as you look, remember about a week ago, we had these gyrations in the stock market. That was one of the issues that was cited as causing that, in that now for the first time in a long time, labor rates are increasing. So again, I'm not saying that's good or bad depending on your perspective, but it is a pressure that may impact the economic expansion as we go forward. Going to the next page, without going through all these details, point out the Federal Reserve left the federal funds target rate at 125 to 150 for the coming year, although they've indicated they may look at increasing that. But a key story here that is not told by the federal funds rate is long-term interest rates are rising. And that, again, was another threat cited by some of the market volatility last week, particularly if you think how that might impact our national debt. We've enjoyed for many years low interest rates, and as a percentage of our GDP, that continues to increase. And those rates, higher interest rates, while may be good for savers, may not be good so for our debt repayments, either at household levels, as it might affect housing, or in terms of our national debt. It's also a point out again, Hampton Roads, again, declined. So the major urban area in the Commonwealth that has not recovered from where we were prior to the Great Recession. We obviously have some challenges in Southwest Virginia also. But there are a couple things that may be beneficial to us in that regard. First of all, if you look at Virginia, the tax cut or the Jobs Tax Cut Act that was passed should be helpful in stimulating economic activity both in our nation and in Virginia. The federal budget deal that was just signed should be good for Virginia, particularly Hampton Roads as it relates to defense. And quite frankly, the sequestration, if all goes well, will have been eliminated. So we may see an uptick in both those heavily defense areas of Hampton Roads and in Northern Virginia. Now, as a side note, there was also an infrastructure package to this. And I would point out, I don't see a lot of help from the infrastructure package that was passed. And in fact, many of the things that were passed in that infrastructure, we've already taken advantage of here in Virginia. But overall, it does look as if potentially that could be good news for us, at least in the short term, both the budget deal and the tax cuts at the federal level in terms of stimulating economic activity in our Commonwealth. And I do want to also point out, we often cite the GDP for our nation. It's running around 3.2%. For a decade, Virginia has lagged that. We're somewhere under 1%. So as we look going forward, that's one thing. It's a lagging indicator for us. That's why we look at jobs and employment and other issues, consumer price index. But just wanted to point out to you that we have lagged that for about a decade. Now, as we get to the revenues for the current month, as I pointed out, good news. On a year-to-date basis, our revenues are up 5.8%, ahead of our annual forecast of 3.4%. And I'll remind everybody, a 1% increase is worth about $193 million. So we're somewhere, if you looked at it just on a percentage basis right now, $400 million or so running ahead of our forecast in total. But I think it's important that we examine what is giving rise to that. First of all, obviously, you all realize withholding tax collections or individual taxes make up somewhere around 70% of all our collections. Now, withholding, you recall, it was down in December because we had one less day. That rebounded in January, and withholding was up 14% for the month. So the good news to that is our trend continues. We are trending above our forecast. So that's indicative, I think, of what's going on in our nation. People are getting jobs, some of the things I quoted earlier in that. But for actually January, what was key is that we had that made up that additional day that we lost in December. Now, on the non-withholding, and this is where really a lot of the action is. As you recall, in December, we had a significant amount of increase of non-withholding estimated payments paid in December that we weren't expecting. And the good news is those collections held up in January. In other words, they didn't reverse. We had about the same level of collections of estimated payments in January as we did last year, meaning all those gains in December still hold. Now, I think I pointed out last time to you, if you look at the 2 months combined, and I'll have a slide on this in a moment, That's about a 40% increase over the prior year, and I'll point out that's greater than the dot-com bubble back in 2000. That was a 38% increase. So obviously something's going on here. The question is it related to tax planning or is it real wealth generation that's driving this? And I'll have some more comments on that in a few minutes. This is the slide that really puts the 2 months together and shows where we are with withholding and non-withholding. And if you look at the 2-month total, our withholding was up 6.3%. And as I pointed out, our non-withholding was up over 40%. Now, these strong receipts, particularly withholding, represent job growth. And in the non-withholding, they're a combination of higher capital gains and maximizing the 2017 payment of state income taxes for federal deduction purposes. The question is, how much of it is related to each one of those items? We had approximately 400 new estimated tax filers this year. 400 new people who didn't do this in the past made estimated tax payments. And of those 400, they gave $150 million in additional estimated payments. Now, let me put that in perspective. Put that in perspective. We have a 5.75% tax rate.
Mr. Secretary,
Yes.
thank you for filing. That helps.
Unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, I looked, it didn't make any difference for me as a state employee to do this. But I'll put this in perspective. At a 5.75% effective tax rate, for every state dollar paid, that indicates that there was $17 in wealth generated. And we had filers that were given well over $1 million in estimated taxes, and I mentioned one time $20 million. So I don't think that all of it is related to wealth generation. And so that's a key we need to keep in mind here, because we're running about $250 million ahead in related to this one item. And we're not going to know until May 1st when the taxes are filed, what type of refunds are going back. Although I believe some of it is related to wealth generation, because I do believe some people at the end of the year did take some gains in their stock portfolios because they knew taxes were going to typically change, or some losses. But I don't know that it's all of this. And that's going to be key for us to keep in mind as we go forward. Now, if you put all this together, if you throw in there, if we had some income tax refunds, January is not a significant month. February tends to be, because that's when we have those with lesser incomes looking to get refunds back, usually file. Many of them have working with the filing like H&R Block anticipation loans. They all coming in. Families that get credits back. So February tends to be a very active month for refunds. We'll see if that causes any of these other filers who may have done this for tax planning to file earlier. Although I would suggest to you, if you're making those type of income estimated taxes, that you probably have a fairly complicated return and maybe don't have all the information to file in February, but we'll see. So we're going to start getting an indication in this month through May of what type of this gain that we see in non-withholding is going to hold. But the good news is it's in our bank. The cash is in the bank. And of course, there's two aspects to this: our cash flow, and you're planning for the budget, but also, I'll talk a little bit later, what response legislatively or policy-wise would we do, not only with the revenue, but how to impact the federal tax changes in Virginia. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, if we look at other areas, sales taxes are 17, 18% of our budget. Anecdotally, we reported that everybody was saying December was going to be a good Christmas season. Well, it didn't happen that way in Virginia. We had about a break even. As you can see, December was 0 and January was up a little bit, less than 1% in there. So anecdotally, we didn't see what we're saying anecdotally, we did not see in cash receipts in that. Although we're still above the trend line, but we are trending down. Now, the reasons for that could be several-fold. First of all, was it service versus products that people were reporting in the Christmas selling season? It could have been internet sales. Obviously, I believe that is a part of what's happening here. And I'll remind you that in front of the Supreme Court, there is the Wayfair case that may handle that, not legislatively, but through the court system. Or it could have been a mix of what was being sold here in terms of what happened in Virginia versus anecdotally. But the bottom line is we did not have an uptick in sales, and the trend seems to be flattening. And so right now, what will happen going forward is housing and furnishings will be driving sales. And that's when I point back to interest rates. Will interest rate rises impact that, people's decisions to buy? So one thing we need to keep in mind as we look forward. One bright spot continues to be corporate income tax collections. They are continuing up, but again, the trend is, while it's remaining positive, it is going back a little bit. In December, we were up 22% year-to-date. Now we're up 15.5% on that in terms of the month. So we're still well ahead of our estimate, but the trend is at least indicating not as positive as we were before. Now, this thing jumps all over the place. I wouldn't read a whole lot into it because based on filings and stuff, but just point out remains positive, but it looks like it's going a little bit downward in terms of its trajectory here. Now, a couple of other things to point out quickly. Recordation insurance premiums. Recordation will be impacted. It's down, decreased 1.9% compared to last year, which is well behind our forecast. Again, I'll point out interest rate rises here could impact that going forward, depending on people buying or refinancing their homes. And insurance, one thing to point out, we had significant refunds issued related to historic rehabilitation tax credits taken by insurance companies. The legislature did limit them to $5 million. That was good, except they went back and amended their prior year returns to get refunds. So don't see this as going. That's one of the things, Mr. Chairman, and I'll talk about this when we talk about tax policy. I would say our preparers and many of our individuals are watching us closely. They're typically ahead of us and figuring out ways to get around this. But nonetheless, they did go back and amend those returns. Don't see that as continuing, but that did cause the reduction for the month. Now, when you put all this together, the good news is we are still trending ahead of our estimate. And so if you look at the top line, the major sources, we're up 6.8%, and we have an annual estimate of 3.4%, so running ahead of that. And if you look at the bottom line, taking everything else in, obviously we're up 5.8% against our trend of 3.4. But if you go all the way over to the right, where we're looking at what is required to meet our estimate, those last two columns, the net individual has gotten better. In other words, we got more income in, non-withholding in, and it's held up. But everything below that is not in the position it was where we were last month. If you look at the forecast to go forward, we needed to perform better going forward than we did a month ago because those things didn't hold up. I mention this because overall we're doing well. We're trending to our reforecasted projection, but I would offer caution that we don't have all the answers in the non-withholding now to be looking at any type of reforecast. Now, we talked last time we weren't going to do that. Our economist, John Lehman, is here. We're working on a reforecast to present to the governor just to confirm this. But it appears to me that if we were looking at taking any one item and saying we could use that for a revenue source, I would be very careful because right now, all of our trending above forecast can be related to what's happening in non-withholding. And I'll show you that. If you look at this slide here, this is a summary of revenue collections since 2000. And it's good to look at how much money we have in the bank compared to what we have in prior years. So if you were to go to January, our average through January over this time we've put 57% of all the monies in the bank that we collect for the year. And if you look down below, we're at 57.9%. That's about $180 million. That sounds awful close to me to the $200 million that we've got in non-withholding. So looking at it from another perspective, just generally looking at the number we put in the bank, I think we have to wait and see what's going to happen with non-withholding before we can either choose in total or any individual item to pull out to say, hey, we might want to reforecast that. So, Mr. Chairman, as the next steps, what I would recommend is certainly one of caution. We have to do further analysis of our year-to-date collection data to really, for me to give you a very good idea of where we're headed. And so while it is positive, and obviously our withholdings are heading up, and that means more jobs, we still have some uncertainty as to where we're going for here. And I wanted to make a few comments about tax conformity, but before I did that, Mr. Chairman, I'll throw it open if there's any questions about where we are with revenues.
Does any member of the committee have any questions of Mr. Secretary regarding the presentation he's made, and particularly on revenues? All right, sir.
Okay, just a couple quick points I would like to make on tax conformity. First of all, this year, as of February 9th, the federal government passed the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2018. And as I said, that has some positive things that impact Virginia. But in their wisdom, they included 34 tax provisions that affected 2017. Now, what that means is the tax conformity law that we had going through, both in the House and Senate, now needs to be amended. The good news is none of those adjustments had any implications to our revenues. We in our forecasting models that John had done, we had thought they would be extended. So no impact to revenue, but we certainly want our filers to be able to take advantage of them. So the governor will be putting forward amendments to those tax conformity bills in compliance with this. And I've spoken with both Senator Hanger, I think I mentioned to Senator Norman, also certainly to Chairman Ware, Delegate Ware, and to Delegate Jones that this was coming down. It is simply conforming to making sure our taxpayers get that break in their 2017 returns. Now, as we look forward, as I know you guys we're all trying to get the budget done and all that, but as we look forward, we're going to have to come to grips with what's going to happen with tax conformity going forward. As we sit today, that would be a significant amount of money coming to the Commonwealth of Virginia because we're a conformity state if we do not adjust to some of the issues that have happened at the federal tax level. Now, I went back and our team has looked very hard at what happened in 86, 87, which is the last time this happened. And there are a couple of significant differences we need to keep in mind. That federal action was messaged over a few years, and it really was related to brackets and income tax rates. It didn't really get into a lot of deductions. So our response at the state level, I won't say it was easy, but it was more straightforward in how to respond to what was happening at the federal level. And people really knew it was coming for many years. Actually, it was 3 years in study, and then it took a year to put the enactments in. That's not the case we have now. We have a tax act that, while we might believe in and applaud the merits of it, there's still a lot is unknown about it. In fact, in the Wall Street Journal this morning, there was a whole section on what the Tax Act will do. And in fact, our models have 10 different parameters we're looking at as to what the interaction of those models will be. Because it's not simply a matter of lower tax brackets or standard deductions. It's interest deductions, other deductions, limits on capitalization of certain items. Very much more complicated interaction in that regard. And complicating this is the personal individual tax components are only good for about 5 years. They sunset. Whereas the business proponent portions of it continue on. So what I would just point out, Mr. Chairman, is we are working through with Chambridge, our consulting firm, looking at what these impacts will be. We will not know this by the time you are finished in this session, and we won't know until May as to what the impacts will be on a cash flow. But we do need to start thinking about how we would go forward in working with you on what policy actions might be taken in terms of not only for our revenue projections, but also for our taxpayers. And as of right now, all they have is these large differences between the federal and the state. So I'm sure you'll be hearing from many constituents about how they do tax planning as we go throughout the year. So I just point that out, Mr. Chairman, that we probably need to think about that before you all leave town as we get through the budget and work through. We'll be able to provide information, but how it should be received and what manner will be used for us to effectuate these. Whether that calls for a special session or not, we won't have it during the reconvened session. Whether you want to wait to next year, we have pros and cons to both of those ways of looking at it. But I just point that out that that's going to be something we're going to have to grapple with as we go through after this session. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my remarks. Unless there's any questions, I'll be on my way.
Any member of the committee have any questions of the Secretary? If not, thank you very much for that comprehensive presentation. And who knows, we might be here in June and you'll have those numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll be ready to report. So thank you.
All right, with that, we will move forward to take up the bills that we have. Delegate Hodges, I think you've got a couple of bills, sir.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
First, you have House Bill 495, Mr. Chairman. Committee
All right,
members.
if I could direct your attention to House Bill 495, it's on page 3 of your agenda. Yes, sir.
All right, House Bill 495 authorizes local commissioners of revenue, the treasurers, the director of finance, or any other similar local official to disclose tax information to non-governmental entities with which their locality is contracted to provide services to assist in the administration of refund processing or other non-audit services related to the administration of taxes.
Okay, why don't you tell us why you brought this bill?
Yes, sir.
I know why you did. But
yes, sir. We actually
colleagues may
have
not.
a locality, actually Gloucester County, that is seeking to convert from one software platform to another. And, our localities rarely have the expertise, capabilities, or to do this on their own. So, of course, they need a vendor. And, of course, vendors need access to this information. So this is already a policy that the Commonwealth of Virginia has, and we're seeking to fix this
All right,
problem.
let's see where we are. Anybody wants to speak in favor of House Bill 495? Yes, ma'am.
Oh, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. I'm Katie Boyle with the Virginia Association of Counties, and we support this bill. We think it's a helpful clarification that will help localities that are undertaking similar projects to Gloucester. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. Anyone else? Anyone who would like to speak in opposition? Any member of the committee have any questions?
Move the bill be reported.
Been moved and seconded, House Bill 495 be reported. If you would call the roll, sir. Is it?
Just go all ayes. I'm looking at the nays and abstentions.
Okay. All in favor of reporting House Bill 495, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those who are opposed, thank you for making it easy for John.
Make it easy for me. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Your next bill, please.
Thank you.
1092, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 1092 seeks to address a dredging problem we're having in our creeks along the Chesapeake Bay and the tributaries.
Okay, do you have an amendment to that, sir?
Oh, yes, sir. I believe there is an amendment that I found out about.
Okay, Senator
before the
Hanger
committee.
moves and Senator Howell second that the amendment to 1095 be adopted. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, the amendment is adopted. Yes, sir, if you would be kind
Thank you,
enough
Mr.
to
Chairman.
tell us what the bill does.
Thank you. For years, these small creek dredging projects have been funded by Congress through earmarks, and we know that is no longer the practice in Washington. So without dredging, these creeks fill in or they shoal. So along comes the Coast Guard, who then says we can no longer maintain these markers, and they're removing the markers. And when you remove these markers, it affects the commerce in these small creeks. The marinas, the watermen, the recreational boaters, they all suffer.
Delegate Thomas.
That way.
Pardon me? Been moved and seconded that, excuse me, House Bill 894 be reported. If you would please note your vote on the board. If you'd announce your vote, please, sir.
Ayes 15, no zero.
The bill is reported. Thank you for being with us, sir. Delegate Collins, good morning, sir.
Morning.
believe you have 179, sir.
I do, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, senators, the change in this is on line 94. Where we're changing it from 2017 to 2020. This was brought to me from the city of Winchester in order to be able to utilize the revenues for a special project. The special project hit some hiccups, and so therefore they missed the deadline. And so we're asking that the deadline be extended to 2020.
Does any member of the committee have any questions of Delegate Collins regarding the bill? Anyone who'd like to speak in favor? Anyone who'd like to speak in opposition? If not, ladies and gentlemen, House Bill 179 is before you. It's been moved and seconded. If you'd please note your vote on the board once it is open. Report the vote, please, sir.
Ayes 15, no 0.
The bill's reported. Thank you for
Thank
being
you,
with
sir.
us, sir. Delegate Keene.
Morning, sir, members, and happy Valentine's Day. I got the memo, Mr. Chairman. So.
I see that you did. I don't know if that's going to help you this morning, though, sir.
No, I'm actually going to be helpful to you, sir. Let me start with the easy one, which is 788,
Well,
and the other two I'll talk about.
I'm sure historically you know who carried that legislation originally.
I know, Mr. Chairman.
So I got an idea what the intent was there.
Yeah, sir, and we'll get back to that in a second. But House Bill 788, if I can start with that first, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely, sir. Go
House Bill
ahead.
788 was an idea brought to me by one of my constituents who's worked on this issue at the federal level. A few years ago, the IRS implemented this program called Tax Preparer's ID number, which is a way for the IRS to try to track tax preparing that comes in through paid professionals to see if there are any patterns of any abuses or problems and fraud. And so they've done this now for a few years. We want to make sure that the state also takes advantage of this program as well. So that's really what it does. Is it takes the IRS program, requires a state filing for those that are paid consultants to prepare, to put their number down so that the state folks can just kind of monitor this and see if there's any tax fraud that we can
I don't
capture.
see any member of the committee have any questions? If not, is anyone who wants to speak in favor of the bill?
My constituent.
Here's
Mr.
here's our
Chairman.
friend who migrated from guns to tax returns.
Yes, yes. Two things I'm sure you all love. Yes.
Well, at least half of them.
Andrew Jennison, H&R Block, we support this
Welcome
bill.
back, sir.
Thank you.
Nice.
This bill has actually been moving around the country as state departments of revenue, taxation, look at ways to help mitigate tax fraud. It's insidious and it's growing around the country, so urge full support.
Nice to have you back with us. Ladies and gentlemen, House Bill 788 is before you. It's been moved and seconded. House Bill 788 be reported. If you'd please note your vote on the board. If you'd announce the vote, please.
Ayes 14, no 0.
The bill is reported. Would you like to do
Sure,
787?
Mr. Chairman, and I'm going to make this easy for all of you and make it harder for the folks standing
like
behind
easy.
me, which is House Bills 787 and 788, as you can tell, came out of the House Subcommittee, Full Committee, and floor unanimous with absolutely no opposition. But, and I've had, every time we've had this bill in front of the Subcommittee and Full Committee, we've asked every single stakeholder if they have any concerns. I'd be happy to address them. In fact, we made some amendments to make sure that we had this in the best place we can. After the bill came out of the House and came over to this chamber, we heard that they had some serious concerns about some of the language. And I think, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. I think there's been just a misunderstanding of what, Mr. Chairman, you and others did back in 2011 of how we structured the level of the evidence. And so rather than ask you all today to try to go back and recreate what we did back in 2011, which is what I thought the bills do, I'd like to ask that either we carry this over if there's a procedure by that, you can do that by next year, or do whatever you can to get these folks behind me to work on this and come back with something that is more clear as opposed to trying to work on this over the next few days. And I'll just tell you, Mr. Chairman, as I said, my county and others, I've asked them every single step of the way if they can weigh in and tell me if there's any problems, and none of them opposed me during the process until it came here. So I just want to make sure that everybody behind me understands that this bill is coming back in some way, shape, or form, and that we would love for everybody to work together so we have something that everybody can live with, as opposed to doing the version I have today.
I think that's very generous of you, and I owe you an apology, sir. Your pink tie did help.
Oh, happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you, sir.
Senator Hanger moves and Senator Howell seconds that House Bill 787 be carried over until the 2019 session. If you'd open the roll, sir.
Roll is open.
Now it's,
Ayes 15, no zero.
thank you for making life easier.
Thank you,
We
Mr. Chairman.
appreciate it.
Thank you,
You
members.
have a good morning.
786, the same thing.
786, I believe, is the same bill, and,
You put it in. Oh, good for you.
okay,
All right.
pardon me?
7,
Oh, you're going to do that? We passed it out for the day,
786. Got it.
but, okay.
We're good.
Senator Hanger moves and Senator Howell second on, having voted on the prevailing side by which we passed by for the day House Bill 124, which is Delegate Austin. I ask for reconsideration on that, and if you would note your vote on the board, please.
Roll is open, sir.
With that, the bill is reconsidered and is before Senator Newman.
Mr. Chairman, I know that Delegate Austin has been going through a lot of items, and I'd like to see if we can help him. I don't think there's any controversy in House Bill 124. This was a request from Bedford that I may have forgotten to put in on our side. I like Bedford, but anyway. So the bill basically just adds Bedford County to Augusta County as those that have the population within the prescribed area that can make a decision to extend out from 4 years to either 5 or 6 years, the amount of time that they can go before a reassessment. I think it's pretty straightforward. I wouldn't be glad to take any questions, but I hope that the committee will consider the bill.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's House Bill, if I could have your attention, please. If House Bill 124 is before you, do anyone have any questions? Anyone in the audience who has a persuasion one way or the other? It's been moved and seconded that House Bill 124 be reported. If you'd open the roll, please, sir. If you'd please note your vote. If you announce the vote, sir.
Ayes 15, no zero.
The bill is reported. Thank you, Senator Newman. We appreciate it. I know that Delegate Austin appreciates it. Does that complete the calendar? If not, the committee will rise.